Okay, welcome to our New York Giants Preservation Society meeting for tonight. It is May 2nd, 2024. We have John Burbridge on today to talk about Willie Mays at the Polo Grounds from the Five Tools book that came out last year from Sabre. Before we get to John, let's just want to review a few things. This is the first official Zoom of May, the month of Mays. We are dedicating the whole month of Zooms to Willie Mays, who will be celebrating his birthday, his 93rd birthday, on Monday, May 6th. Next week, we have Mark Sternman. Mark will be on Thursday. We'll be discussing Willie's managers, both in New York and in San Francisco, and with the Mets as well. So that is something to look forward to. Without any further ado, I'd like to introduce, many of you know, John is a member of our society. He really is a great historian on Giants baseball, and he still loves them to this day. So let's give a nice round of applause to John Burbridge. John?
Thank you. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Gary, and thank you for having me tonight. Let me just give you a little background about myself. I was born in 1940 in Jersey City, New Jersey, and I saw my first game in 47. It was the Jersey City Giants playing in Roosevelt Stadium. And with my brother, my father, my uncle, I saw my first Polo Grounds game in 1948 against the Dodgers. It was a night game. So that's kind of a little bit of my background. Let me just tell you how this book came about. As Gary pointed out, Five Tools, a Sabre publication, and Bill Nolan felt it was necessary to have such a book on the occasion of his 90th birthday. And he, as usual, sent out a email and said, look, here are the topics I want covered, and here are the games I want covered. And I looked at the topics and I said, you know what, Bill, you're not paying enough attention to Willie's early days in New York and the Polo Grounds. How about if I write an essay on Willie Mays at the Polo Grounds? And Bill said, go with it, okay? So here is my thesis associated with this essay that appears in Five Tools. Certain ballparks complement the strengths of specific players. Yankee Stadium, which opened in 1923, was termed the house that Ruth built. One reason for such a slogan was the short distance to the right field stands, which seemed to cater to the powerful left-handed stroke of Babe Ruth. While the benefits of Ruth playing in Yankee Stadium were immediate, it took many years for a player to take advantage of the vast center field at the Polo Grounds. That player was Willie Mays. So let's start by talking a little bit about the Polo Grounds. There was a Polo Grounds in New York City from 1876 to 1963. And in the first Polo Grounds, which was on 110th Street between 5th and 6th, that was used just for polo. But a player from the Brooklyn team in the National League, Jim Utry, he decided that Manhattan needed baseball. So he looked for a backer and found John B. Day, and they started a team that played at that same Polo Grounds on 110th Street, and it was in 1880. They built stands, and then the field was no longer used for polo. And that team that played there was the New York Metropolitans, and it was an independent team that played just against National League teams and other independent teams. They weren't affiliated with any league. But in 1883, they moved the New York Metropolitans to the American Association, and he brought in a team, the defunct Troy team, into the play also at this Polo Grounds 1, which I'll call it. And that Troy team was the forerunner of the New York Giants. Initially, they were called the New Yorkers, but they quickly assumed the name of the Giants. Now, the Metropolitans disbanded in 1887, and so the Giants were the only team that was playing at this Polo Grounds 1. By the way, between 1883 and 1887, they both had fields at Polo Grounds 1. In 1889, the city of New York said, look, we got to extend 111th Street across this field. And so that was the end of Polo Grounds 1. So now Day decides he's got to find another locale for the Giants, and that's Polo Grounds 2, which is at Coogan's Hollow, up northern Manhattan. And what he does is he leases property there, and it's at the south end of the property. And that's where the Giants start playing in 1890. But much to Day's amazement, another league forms, the Players League with John Montgomery Ward. And that Players League leases out the northern part of Coogan's Hollow. And that's where this team plays in the Players League, and the field is called Brotherhood Park. Well, after one season, 1890, the Players League and the National League settle, and no longer do we have the team playing at the Brotherhood at the field Brotherhood Park. Okay, and the owners of the Giants now decide that, Brotherhood Park is a better venue than our Polo Grounds 2. So the Giants move to Polo Grounds 3, which is the northern part of Coogan's Hollow. And they decide they're going to bring the fences in. They build stands down the left field line and down the right field line, moving the foul lines from 335 to 277 left field, and from 335 to 258 in right field. They sound, you remember those foul lines. Okay, so the Giants play in Polo Grounds 3 all the way up to 1911. And at this time, John Brush is now the owner of the Giants. And there's a fire. And Polo Grounds 3 burns to the ground. It burns to the ground on April 14th, right at the beginning of the season. And amazing. Within a couple of months, Polo Grounds 4 arises, a concrete and steel structure similar to Shibe Park and Forbes Field, which is now how stadiums are being built at this point in time. And the Giants play in 1911 in that ballpark. And of course, in 1913, the Yankees start playing in the Polo Grounds. No one really thinks about these short foul lines until the Yankees acquire Babe Ruth. And in 1919 and 1920, 21, the Babe hits a lot of home runs for the Yankees. And in fact, even though the Giants win the World Series in 21 and 22, the Yankees outdraw the Giants, and they become the most popular team in New York City in terms of attendance all the way through the end of the Giants' tenure in the Polo Grounds in 1956. So let's fast forward now to 1948. Okay? As I said, the Giants are playing second fiddle to the Yankees, and now they're starting to play third fiddle to the Yankees and the Dodgers as the Dodgers start outdrawing them. So finally, Horace Stoneham decides to make a move. And Stoneham basically is going to change managers. He's going to let nice guy Mellock go. And we're not necessarily sure, even to this day, what Stoneham had in mind, but he's going to meet with Branch Rickey. And Branch Rickey has two managers. He's got Bert Schotten, who managed in 1947 to a pennant. And then, of course, he's got Leo, who was banned in baseball in 47, but is back managing the the Dodgers in 1948. Well, we know what Rickey wanted. Rickey wanted to get rid of DeRocha. So it ends up that Stoneham ends up with DeRocha as the manager of the Giants. So one day he's managing the Dodgers, the next day he's managing the Giants. And I don't believe there was any transaction cost, which is amazing, which shows that Rickey really wanted to get rid of DeRocha. So now we have Leo as the manager of the Giants. And while all this is going on, there's a young man playing for Fairfield High School in Alabama. He's playing basketball and he's playing football, and he's kind of an all-state player, and that player is Willie Mays. Now, there is no baseball at his high school, so he's playing in industrial leagues, and he actually, in 47, plays with a farm team of the Birmingham Black Barons, which is the Chattanooga team. And then in 48 and 49, he plays for the Birmingham Black Barons alongside his father. He only plays on weekends because his dad really wants him to finish high school, Cap Mays. So he starts attracting attention from some of the major league teams. And the most obvious team he attracts attention from is the Boston Red Sox. They actually have a farm team, the Birmingham Barons, playing in the same field as the Birmingham Black Barons, Rickford Field, where the Giants will play later this year. And of course, you know that Boston Red Sox were late on signing black players. Pumpsy Green in the late 1950s. And so they don't want Willie in 1948 or 49. And then you have the Boston Braves. And the Boston Braves actually do move into signing black players. I remember Sam Jethro playing in the Polo Grounds in the 50s. And of course, they sign Aaron, but they pass on Mays. And then Roy Campanella is barnstorming through Birmingham with a team, and he sees Willie play against his barnstorming team. And he gets a hold of the Dodgers. And Wood Matthews is sent down to Birmingham to look at Mays. And Wood Matthews says, he can't hit a curveball. Thank God. So the Dodgers pass on Willie. And the next person to go down is Eddie Montague, Giant scout. He's actually looking at Alonzo Perry, but when he gets to Birmingham and sees Mays, there's no doubt in mind it's the greatest prospect he's ever seen, and Mays signs a contract with the Giants. Now, Mays actually played 2 games in the Polo Grounds. He's brought up to play against a Cuban team, a Cuban national team, in 48 and 49. So now Willie has signed a contract, and the Giants assign him to Trenton in the Interstate League. But he still has to graduate from high school. So he graduates from high school, and in his first appearance in professional baseball, or at least what we formerly called professional baseball, now with the Negro Leagues, of course, Willie did play with them in 48 and 49. He ends up playing for Trenton, and they go to Hagerstown. He's playing, first game he plays at Hagerstown. And Hagerstown is below the Mason-Dixon line. And he gets a rude awakening. He gets, the N-word is used against Willie, and he has to overcome that. And 3 of his teammates actually stay with him that evening. But he ends up batting, I think, .355 with Trenton. So he's a big success in the Interstate League. And the Giants move him up, and they say, okay, you're going to play in spring training. You're going to play with the Minneapolis Millers. And the Giants actually have spring training in Florida, and so along with the Minneapolis Millers. And he attracts the attention of Leo. Minneapolis is playing a exhibition game or spring training game against Ottawa. That's where Jersey City Giants ended up in 1951. So he's playing against Ottawa, and he gets a couple of hits, plays flawless outfield, and Leo says to Horace Stoneham, he's got to be my starting center fielder in 1951. We have to have him patrolling the Polo Grounds center field in 1951. Horace says, no, he's only 20 years old. We have to send him to Minneapolis. And he goes to Minneapolis and hits .477. It's .477, and in late May, he gets called up to the Polo Grounds, calls up to the Giants. And their first series is in Philadelphia. And I think most of you are well aware of the trials Willie went through initially in the Major League. He goes 0 for 12, and he has a miscue in his first game in the outfield in Philadelphia in Shibe Park. Then he goes back to the Polo Grounds, and DeRocha bats him third against the Braves and against Warren Spahn. And Willie responds with a home run, long home run over the left field roof. But that's the only hit he gets in that series with the Braves. And then the Pittsburgh Pirates come in, and Willie goes 0 for 5. So Willie's had a rough beginning, and he ends up crying in the clubhouse. And two of the Giants coaches, Freddie Fitzsimmons and Herman Franks, they see him and they say, we got to get Leo in here, and Leo's got to talk to him. And Leo does talk to him. And Willie tells Leo, you got to send me down. I can't hit this major league pitching. And Leo says, as long as I am the manager of the Giants, you're my center fielder. And also, I have a couple pointers for you. You're trying to pull the ball too often, and you need to hit a little bit more to right field. And you got to pull those stirrups up. They're getting a lot of low ball strikes on you. And finally, Willie, I don't want you just playing center field. I want you playing left field. I want you playing right field. We have this cavernous outfield out there, and you got to get everything you can possibly catch out in that outfield. And Willie responds. And the Giants still are struggling that year. They're following the Dodgers. And then we come up in August to one of Willie's probably two greatest plays at the Polo Grounds. And I'll just kind of go through what was said in the New York Times about this particular play in the Polo Grounds. On August 14th, the two teams began a 3-game series at the Polo Grounds. The Giants won the first game 4-2. The second game of the series pitted Ralph Branca of the Dodgers against Jim Hearn. What a waiver pickup Jim Hearn was of the Giants. With the two teams tied 1-1 after 7 innings, Billy Cox led off the 8th with a single. Jackie Robinson pinch hit for Wayne DeWilliger and flied out. Hearn committed a balk, moving Cox to second, which was followed by a Branca single. Fortunately, Cox didn't score. He goes to just the third, but that brings up Carl Furillo. With runners on first and third, Furillo hit a fly ball to right center field. Joseph Sheen of the New York Times had the following description of what happened next. It looked plenty deep, enough to bring in Cox, especially since Mays had to run a long way to get to the ball. But Willie, making a complete whirling pivot on a dead run, cut loose with a tremendous peg that boomed into Wes Castrom's mitt in perfect position for the catcher to tag the sliding Cox. Eddie Brannick, the road secretary, and this is kind of amazing, this is 1948, he's been the road secretary for the Giants since 1922. He said, I've seen Trespica, I've seen Joe DiMaggio, I've seen Terry Moore, all of them. I've never seen anything like that throw. This kid made the greatest throw I ever looked at. Both the Giants and Dodger players were in disbelief. Now, Mays ends up, as so often, leading off in the bottom of the 8th, singles to center field, and Wes Westrom hits a 2-run home run, and the Giants win the second game of the series 3-1. Now, does this propel the Giants into a long winning streak? You know they won 16 games in a row at that point. And as a result, chip into that Dodger lead and end up winning the pennant on Bobby Thompson's home run shot heard around the world. And Willie ends up in his first World Series. He finishes the year batting .274 with 20 home runs and ends up being Rookie of the Year. Now, after the World Series, he heads down to Alabama and he gets his draft notice. So he's going to have to, he applies for a deferment, saying that his family depends on him for their income. But that deferment is denied. And after a month playing in 52, he only bats .236. He ends up going into the Army. Now, the Army is like another spring training for Willie. He gets a little bit bigger, taller. He came to like a half inch to an inch in the Army. He puts on some weight. And he plays in the John Shea book. I believe he says he played almost like 170 games in the Army. And he perfects the basket catch, which he saw Bill Rigney use. So he perfects that in the Army. And he comes back as a very somewhat different player in 1954. Of course, in 1954, he starts a season by swatting a lot of home runs. And in fact, I think he gets, after 88 games, he's got 36 home runs. I may not be correct on that, but I think that's true. But Leo starts talking to him and says, Willie, you probably will do the team a lot more benefit is if you try to hit the ball to right center field a little bit more. Again, getting back to that 1951 advice he gave Willie. And so Willie, and you might even win the batting title. So Willie takes DeRoche's advice, and the Giants continue moving on to win the pennant. And Mays ends up, he only hits 5 more home runs that season. So he ends up with 41 for the season. But last day of the season, Willie is tied, a virtual tie, with Don Mueller, his teammate, Mandrake Magician, and Duke Snyder, that other center field from across the river. They're virtually tied. Willie goes 3 for 5 on that last day. Snyder doesn't get any hits. I think Mueller got a couple of hits, and Willie wins the batting title in 1954 with a 345 batting average. And of course, that leads us to the World Series. And that first game in the World Series, where we have Bob Lemon against Sal Maglie, tied up 1-1 in the top of the 8th inning. And the Yankees, it's hard to conceive that the Yankees actually lost the pennant. Cleveland won that pennant in 111 games. So Cleveland gets a man on first and gets a man on second. And Don Little comes in to pitch to Vic Wertz. Wertz has already gotten a couple of hits off of Maglie. So DeRoche wants a lefty to pitch to him, and he thinks Maglie may be tiring a little bit. So he brings in Little. And, of course, I think Little gets a 2-1 count, and Wertz swings and sends a long drive to deep center field. Let's kind of go to the John Shea book now and Willie's own comments about that play. When Wertz hit that ball, I never doubted I would catch it. I was thinking I needed to get the ball back to the infield to prevent Cleveland from taking the lead. Many of us would think that was a very hard catch, but in Willie's eyes, that was not necessarily that difficult. That throw was what he was thinking. I scored from second on fly balls that were hit out there. Easy. Doby was a very aggressive runner. He might be trying to tag and advance 2 bases. They told me he was halfway home and he had to come back to second to tag up. I needed to keep him from scoring. The ball was hit. I ran toward the wall, knowing I'm making the catch and thinking about how I'd get that ball back. I stopped in front of the wall and made a very quick U-turn. It was simple to me. You go back, you catch the ball, you spin, you turn, you throw it back to the infield. I don't like to exaggerate, but I was young and cocky enough to know I could catch any ball in the park. That's an interesting little statement. But the important thing for me was to keep the runners, to stay on their bases. Doby only got 1 base, and Rosen went back to first. Now, in the Shea book, there's a little bit of debate about how long that fly ball went when Willie caught it. Some say it was 450 feet. It was before that barrier in the that green barrier that fronts the bleachers in right center field. But no matter what, that would have been a home run in any other ballpark in the major leagues. But it only was an out, and it only allowed Willie to show his unbelievable talent. That catch, probably the most famous catch in the history of baseball, only could have occurred at the Polo Grounds. So I say it was destiny that Willie ended up at the Polo Grounds, and we now have that unbelievable catch that he made. I use it as my screensaver. I just love to watch that thing. I remember I actually stayed home from school that day. My mother and father let me stay home from school to watch that first World Series game. So the Giants go on, and probably that catch propels the Giants to win that game 5-2 on the dusty roads home run that only goes like 255 feet down the right field line. But the Giants win 5-2, come back the next day. Antonelli wins 3-1, and they go to Cleveland, and the Giants sweep. And so the Giants now have won the World Series. And it's really was started by Willie's great catch in center field. Okay. Now, the 1951 season, excuse me, we go now to the 1955 season, and Willie starts hitting home runs now. And he ends up, DeRocha says, okay, hit as many as you can. And at the end of that season, Giants don't particularly do that well. Leo decides that that's it for him. He's going to he's going to leave the Giants. And on the last day of the season, he tells Willie that he's leaving the Giants as manager. Willie says, what am I going to do without you, Leo? And Leo says, you'll be fine. Rigney becomes manager, and there's tension. Now, in 56, in fact, Rigney decides that maybe DeRocha was coddling Willie, and he wants to treat all his players the same. So he actually, I think, fines Mays for lackadaisical play. But 1955 and 1956, the rumors are rampant that the Giants and the Dodgers are going to move to possibly the West Coast, but initially the Giants were thinking about Minneapolis. So I want to digress a little bit from my talking about the Polo Grounds to go to my hometown, Jersey City. In 1955, Walter O'Malley works out an agreement with the city of Jersey City to play every National League team in Jersey City in 1956, 1957, and also an option for 58. Now, Dodgers players don't really like playing in Jersey City. And there's no real significant base of fans for the Dodgers in Jersey City. So attendance is not necessarily what O'Malley expected, except for two teams, Milwaukee and also the Giants. And the Giants play, I think it was August 15th, 1956. I got a trivia question. Can you yell out the answer? What Giants pitcher beat the Dodgers in 3 different ballparks in 1956? Anyone?
Antonelli.
Johnny Antonelli. That's right. And the first of those 3 victories was in Jersey City. And I talked at a SABR meeting about the 2 Giant-Dodger games in Jersey City. And before that, I got a hold of Antonelli, and he wanted me to ask that trivia question every time I ever talked about his game. So that's why I'm asking that trivia question. But Antonelli pitches a 2-hitter, shuts the Dodgers out, wins the game 1-0 against Don Newcomb, who also had a great game. And guess who hit the only home run to win the game? And that was Willie Mays in the 4th inning. And I later talked, let's go to the 2011, that breakfast where they brought the trophy into New York, and they gave us the Hirsch biography. And as I went up to talk to Willie and get his autograph, I said, Willie, you hit a lot of home runs, but the one I remember the most was that one in Jersey City. Willie never looked up and just looked at me 55 years afterward and said, off of Don Newcomb. So I always wondered if he remembered every home run he hit. Okay. So it's interesting, too, that the following year in 56, the Giants end up playing the Dodgers again. It's again Antonelli and Newcomb, but neither one of them has the stuff they had the previous year. And Newcomb, Hank Sauer hits a pinch hit home run in the top of the 9th to beat the Dodgers, and they later won 8-5. And Nuke gets booed, and he does a kind of despicable thing as he leaves the field. Okay, but let's get back to the Polo Grounds now. And now we have 56 and 57. Of course, 1957 is the last year the Giants play in the Polo Grounds. And we can fast forward to the last game against the Pittsburgh Pirates. Willie still playing all out. beats out a hit in the 7th inning to the cheers of the 11,000 people that were there. But at the end of the game, the Pirates win 9-1, and as Willie runs to the clubhouse, he hears, "We're calling all fans for the last time," in the Polo Grounds. Of course, he comes back in 1962 and 1963 to play in the Polo Grounds with the San Francisco Giants against the Mets. And just kind of a little something that Arthur Daly said on the occasion of Willie coming back. "The center field turf at the Polo Grounds looks normal this weekend for the first time in 5 years. Willie has come home." And Willie did not disappoint, and he hit 3 home runs in the 4-game sweep. Let me finish my little talk here by going to Donald Honing's quote that finishes the essay. "Putting Mays in a small ballpark would have been like trimming a masterpiece to fit a frame." Thank you very much.
Hey, John, that was a great way to start off our month celebration of Willie Mays. Really, that was awesome. So enjoyable.
That was awesome.
I'm going to start with the question. So you said you were born in 1940. So got to tell you, you're very well preserved. But my question to you is this.
Thank you very much.
So you saw Mays basically from age 11 to about 21 or 22 play at the Polo Grounds with the Giants, and later on when he came back with the San Francisco Giants. So you weren't 5 years old. You knew what was going on. Was he, to this date, the greatest player you ever saw?
Oh, no doubt about it. Absolutely no doubt about it. It was so enjoyable. We used to sit in the lower right field stands at the Polo Grounds. And we go over those double headers. And you could see 2 games for $1.25. That was amazing. And then you have Willie playing center field. And he was all over the place in the outfield. So it was so enjoyable watching him. And he was without a doubt the greatest player I ever saw.
And my second question is, and I brought this up in the past, you mentioned the Troy team. The Troy team was the forerunner of the New York Giants, correct?
Yeah, Troy team.
Right. So I don't know if you know this, but we brought this up before. When we went to the 2011 trophy tour that you said you got the Hirschbook at, the city of Troy petitioned the Giants to bring that trophy to Troy, feeling that they stole the team from Troy, New York, brought them to New York, and that the Giants owed them a favor. And I don't know if you know this, the Giants actually brought the World Series trophy to Troy in 2011 as well.
Yeah, I'm well aware that they did go to Troy in 2011. They didn't really steal the team from Troy. From what my understanding is, and from the essay on the Polo Grounds that is on the Sable website, it says that Troy and another team in the National League went belly up after the 1882 season. And Day, who was the owner of the Metropolitans, he was expected to move the Metropolitans into the National League. Troy was in the National League, and he was expected to move Troy into the National League, the Metropolitans to the National League. But he surprised everybody by moving them to the American Association, getting the rights to a lot of those Troy baseball players and bringing them down to New York City to play for the New Yorkers that later became the Giants. That's my understanding, Gary.
Yeah, and Worcester was the other team that kind of folded and went to Philadelphia. You're right, John, though. They didn't.
That's right. They went to Philadelphia. Correct.
It was also nice that the Giants recognized the roots, too.
Thank you. So, John, I really, again, just you talk about Mays with such glee. It really does show. So thank you so much for tonight. Mars, you are up.
Thank you, John. That was great reminiscing. I have a few things to add. In 1954, Mays was actually ahead of Babe Ruth's home run pace in June. In 1958, Mays batted 347, I believe, and Ashburn 350. But on the last day of the season, from what I heard, Ashburn had 5 bunt singles to win the batting title. I think Mays had 2 or 3 hits on that last day of the season. I also found the Metropolitans jersey, which was an M surrounded by a BB for baseball. I found that on the internet. And in 1949, when I was 2 years old and I had gone to my parents took me to my first game at the Polo Grounds, they bought me a Giants uniform with the number 25, which was Whitey Lockman's
Roddy
uniform.
Lockman, yep.
Yep. And then I had an uncle Nat, my father's uncle, my great uncle, who was a Giants fan. But when Ruth hit 59 home runs in the Polo Grounds, and the Yankees were the first team to draw 1 million people in the Polo Grounds, which was why McGraw evicted them, my great uncle Nat turned into a Yankees fan, but my pop always remained a Giants fan. And another added note was on one year, probably back in the 20s, the Giants had spring training in Hot Springs, Arkansas,
Right.
and that's where Oni Madden, who owned the Cotton Club, owned a casino. So my last question to you is, what was the attendance in the Jersey City ballpark?
It was about 25,000 fans. The capacity was about 25,000. So for the 2 Giant Dodger games in Roseville, they were sold out. And Milwaukee, because Milwaukee was really a very good team in 56 and 57, they also sold out. But other than that, the attendance was not necessarily too good. Jackie Robinson hated playing there. They booed him in 1957 when he made an error in the first game. So I would say the attendance they would get around 15,000, except when they were playing Milwaukee and the Giants. But
Thank you, John.
O'Malley was getting the parking because they had a big parking lot, and of course it was terrible to get to in public transportation. So a lot of people drove there. And he got the parking. I think he charged him $10 for a parking, and he got the receipts. And he paid paid Jersey City, I think, $10,000. I have an article in the Saber Journal back about that whole period when the Dodgers and Giants played in Jersey City.
Thank you, John.
Thank you.
Mark. And for the ladies and gentlemen here tonight, again, this is a Saber publication. If you belong to Saber, you could download it, or you could buy it on Amazon, and you can read John and everybody else's article. Fantastic book. William, you are up.
Thank you, Gary. Mr. Burbridge, I enjoyed so much your presentation. I can see that you are so passionate about Willie Mays and the Giants, and you know quite a lot of history, which I admire very much. What I wanted to ask you is that, and tell me if I'm not correct, when Willie Mays first came up, he wore number 14 because Jack McGuire had number 24. And then McGuire eventually was picked up on waivers by the Pirates, and Mays was then issued number 24. Have you ever seen Mays or a photo of Mays with the number 14?
No, I have never seen that. And how long did McGuire and Mays play together then when he first came up?
Maybe 1 or 2 games, because Mays came up on May 25th.
Okay.
And by May 28th, McGuire had been picked up on waivers by the Pirates, because the Rocha felt he had one too many outfielders, and so he waived McGuire. And the interesting thing is that McGuire's father was a scout, and he's the one that signed Don Mueller for the Giants. He was a scout for the Giants, Gordon McGuire.
Okay.
And the other thing that I found interesting is I looked at the box score of that first game of the World Series in '54. Vic Wertz got a hit every at bat except for the time when Mays caught that ball. He went like 4 for 5 in that game. That's incredible.
Yeah, he hit the
Yeah, he was
ball.
incredible. He hit a triple, a double, a few singles, and if it wasn't for that catch, he would have had a perfect day at the plate.
You know, I have Vic Wertz. I live in the southern Pennsylvania now, and Vic Wertz was from Reading, Pennsylvania. And years later, a few years ago, I went with my grandson. He was playing a tournament in Reading, and there was this complex in Reading that had 4 fields, and they had one field which copied the Polo Grounds, and that was for kids, so it didn't have 400 feet,
Right.
but it was called Wertz Field. So you know, Wertz was a hell of a player, and he really could have been a great hero of that World Series, except for Willie and the Polo Grounds.
Exactly. And I think in Reading they have a double-A team of the Phillies, if I remember correctly. They do play baseball.
Yes, they have a double-A team in the Reading.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Burbridge. Take care.
Thank you, Will. All right, here's a guy who might rival you in passion for Mr. Mays, Mr. Harvey Weinberg. Harvey, you are up.
John, that was brilliant, wonderful. It's going to be one of my favorite replays on the YouTube channel. I'll tell you that. I got one reminiscence and then a question, sort of contemporary question. It's funny. I was 8 years old. July 10th, 1954 was my first game. So I'll be commemorating my 70th year as a Giant. I'm a little younger than you, but not much. And we sat in the lower right field grandstands also, my dad, my brother, and me. Great view of Willie. Great. And in that game, made a terrific catch, and other things. And my eyes I never left watching Willie Mays. My contemporary question is, and I'm sure you can help us out. I guess it's about 10 years now. Major League Baseball named the World Series MVP trophy after Willie. And there was some controversy here in New York among some of the talking mouths on WFAN that Mickey Mantle should have been named after Mickey Mantle because he hit more home runs, or Babe Ruth or something like that. But to me, I never read anything, but my guess was, just as you said, that catch, that play, that catch and throw in '54 is so iconic and so emblematic of a World Series game. That's why Major League Baseball named that trophy after Willie. What do you think?
I totally agree. Willie didn't have any great World Series hitting wise, but that catch is the most looked upon play in the history of baseball, I think. More people have seen that catch than anything else. And it just was an unbelievable play. Of course, Willie didn't think it was the greatest player in history, in his history.
Well, what does he know?
Yeah. You know, Willie, I in the essay, I initially had a play he made in Ebbets Field. And if you read the John Shea book, Willie says that was his greatest play, caught a ball barehanded from Bobby Morgan. But Bill Nolan, my editor, he basically said, we're editing out everything that's associated with any other park other than the Polo Grounds, because your topic is the Polo Grounds. But it wasn't necessarily the greatest play Willie ever saw. And even the Ferrillo play wasn't. But it was, without a doubt, the greatest play in the history of a World Series.
Thanks, John.
Thank you.
Harvey, thanks. Charles Fracchia, you are up.
Well, I have a question for you, because I heard this. I don't know if it's true or not. I love Willie Mays. I live in San Francisco. I've been by his house, but I've not, just to see the M in the driveway and the big gate, and that's about it. And, you know, I would never go ring his doorbell, never do that. My question is it true that Louis DeRocher said that Willie Mays would have been a 6-tool player if he knew how to cook? I had heard
That's-
that, and I don't know if it's true or not.
I don't know. I don't know about that.
That I had heard that once. I thought it was a great line. I don't know if it's true, but I had heard it, and I
The
thought well, it's a
DeRocher, the
great
DeRocher
line.
quote, the DeRocher quote was, "If he knew how to cook, I'd marry him."
Okay, all right.
I do remember some DeRocher quotes from his book, but I remember him making quotes, but I can't really repeat them because I've forgotten about them. But DeRocher had some very interesting statements about Willie as a player, saying he's the greatest ball player he ever saw. And DeRocher saw, he played with Babe Ruth. He played with all those Dodger players, and he basically saw Mantle and everybody else. So DeRocher was probably a pretty good judge of playing ability.
I would say so. I think his career in baseball, I want to say 60 years or so, something like that along those lines. So, but I remember hearing that quote years ago, and I absolutely loved it because I thought it was so funny and so kind of, it just, struck me as so kind of Willie Mays-ish,
Thank you, Charles.
Anyway.
William, Bill Cara, I just can't believe what you said about he would have been 5 for 5, and to get robbed your fifth
Yes.
hit that
It's-
way is just unbelievable. Really.
Yeah, it's true. It's true. I looked up on the box score. It was just incredible. What an incredible day he had.
Yeah. Does anybody else whose face I can't see and may not be able to raise their hand want to ask a question? All right, then. John, again, your article is in this great publication. Keep going strong, John. And, don't be a stranger. Let's all give it up for John Burbridge.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Really,
Thank you.
John, really enjoyable. And I know you've been on our other Zooms, but, frequent us often, okay?
Yes, I will, definitely.
And I also want to thank all of you for understanding why we got a little late start today. Much appreciated. Hopefully next week we're back on a normal time. But everybody else, I will hang around a little bit. I know a lot of you want to watch the Knick game, so if anybody wants to talk Giant baseball for a little, we'll hang around. But until next week, we'll see you. And don't forget Monday in your thoughts, remember Willie Mays' birthday. Have a great night, everybody.
Thank you, guys.
Take care.